Hello everybody. So today in this video we are going to be talking about the top 12 baits that I like to use for multi-species. So this is basically going to cover pretty much anything that has caught more, actually no, there's 11, excuse me. Anything on this table that has and can catch multi-species. So we're going to go with soft plastic baits first because there's more of them, and then we're going to go with hard baits. There's not as many hard baits because most of the time I'm using soft plastics for the multi-species fish. Number one, my opinion, probably the best saltwater bait, or not saltwater, but multi-species bait. I was going to say here in a second that this thing has not only caught fish in freshwater, but has also caught fish in saltwater. It's caught redfish and speckled trout in the saltwater, and it has also caught some pretty good bass and bluegill up here in the States, up here in Illinois, and has also caught some pretty nice crappie as well. And that is the Doc's Lure Company 2-inch swimmer. This here is crystal shad with black, gold, and silver flake. Probably one of my favorite baits, in my opinion. Honestly, it probably is one of my favorite baits, just because it can catch just about anything. It's a perfect little minnow profile. If you're dealing with small bait, you can use it. If you're dealing with bigger bait and you just want to catch a lot of fish, you can use it. It's, in my opinion, probably one of the best profile swim baits out there on the market. Definitely the best small swim bait that I've ever used. Definitely, in my opinion, has to be the number one out of all these baits is that guy right there. Number two would be the 1.5 swimmer. So you guys seen my last video where I caught my first fish of the year. Sadly, I was not able to get that fish on video, but I was able to take a picture of it before it flopped out of my hand. So if you guys want to see that fish, it was a little bluegill. You can go back to the thumbnail of that video, and I made the thumbnail the picture of me holding up the bluegill. So you guys can at least see that. But that was caught on a green pumpkin 1.5 swimmer. Probably, in my opinion, one of the best bluegill baits out there. I think it's an awesome bluegill bait. I love it with just a small jig head. I'll actually show you the jig head that I typically will use with both the 2-inch and the 1.5. Is that guy right there, a little red and white jig head. Now, I've got a crap load of these because the person who made them painted some of them wrong. You guys can see there it's got a little bit more red than it needs to have. I got a whole crap load of them for free, so I can just go back and get into the bucket of jig heads that I have. I have a bunch of painted ones and unpainted ones, and I can just keep using them. And if I bend out the hook, which sometimes does happen if I hook into a brush pile, but I can just run back in the house, cut it off, put another one on, and go back out and fish. But the 1.5 swimmer not only has it caught big bass, it caught my mom's first bass and bluegill of the year. It caught almost a 3.5 pound bass this year, or last year, this past fishing season. Last year it also caught one of my biggest crappie of the year. The biggest crappie that I caught all year was actually on the 2-inch swimmer. It also caught a bunch, and I mean a bunch, of bluegill and green sunfish bluegill hybrids. Honestly, when I would go bluegill fishing, I would take a green pumpkin and a crystal shad colored one of these, and these two guys right here would be pretty much the whole entire show. That's just what I'd fish, and I would catch a crap load of bluegill. There was one day where I caught 13 bluegill in, I think, 15-20 minutes, somewhere around there. And there was another day where I caught, I think, 15 bluegill and a bass. And I also caught a snapping turtle, actually, on a green pumpkin one. So they catch just about everything. Was able to actually catch a small, probably, plate size snapping turtle with that. And I was just crawling it really slowly on the bottom. And he bit it, and I hooked him. So it works for not only fish, but also reptilian creatures. Another bait that I personally have fished a little bit, but my dad has fished this a little bit more than I have. And he's caught crappie, bass, and bluegill, all three on this bait I have caught one crappie, one bass, and I caught one bluegill as well. So I guess I caught one of each on this bait. But he actually caught all three in one day, and that is the 2-inch DS Minnow. So you guys can see there that tail has a ton of action, and when it's really moving in the water, is an awesome bait. In my opinion, one of the best bluegill bed baits there is this guy right here. It's something that I do with this also, is if your bluegill are biting just the tail and kind of moving it off the bed. I've had problems with that as well. Right here where the body starts, I'll break it off and put the jig head through there, and that tail just has a very, very fast little paddle tail action. It's a really good bed bait. When you're not bed fishing and you're jigging on a cork, this guy right here kills it. That's what my dad was doing that day. He was using a green pumpkin one on just a normal, tiny little unpainted jig head, just like the one I showed you a second ago, with a little bitty cork about that long, just kind of hopping it. Every once in a while he'd hop it, and pretty soon the line would just swim off. And honestly, it was kind of a mixed bag of what he'd catch. I was sitting there and I was watching him, and one minute he'd pull out a 12-inch bass, and then the next minute he'd pull out a 6-inch bluegill, and then 2 casts later he'd pull out a 10-inch crappie. It was a very mixed bag day, but he caught most of the fish on this guy and on the 2-inch swimmer. And the colors he was actually using, he was using a green pumpkin 2-inch DS Minnow, and he was using a white with blood red, the Daredevil colored 2-inch swimmer. I actually have one right here. He was using one of these guys right here. Next bait, in my opinion, probably one of the most deadly bed baits for bluegill besides the 2-inch DS Minnow, just because it kind of looks like a little crawfish, kind of looks like a little bug, it looks like just about anything really, and that is the 2-inch 2-inch flat runner. So you guys know the original flat runner. Let me pull this one here out. Awesome flipping bait for bass, awesome bed bait as well. Well, this here's the little brother, little tiny brother of that bait. Put a little jig head on it. I use these jig heads right here. It has an awesome action when you jig it up. It twists and curls and everything else, and it has an incredible action when you're just jigging it up off the bottom. One of my favorite ways to use it is moving it very, very slowly, like you would a shaky head for bass. My favorite color has got to be green pumpkin. That's the color that I've caught most of my fish with this bait on. I've caught some pretty good bluegill, and I've caught one bass with that bait. It was a very small bass, but it was a bass nonetheless. Okay, so next bait is a bait that won't really catch you bluegill. It might catch you crappie, but it'd mainly be a bass, walleye. What's that one fish? I just had thought, and I can't think of it now. It just went shooting off into outer space. I can't think of it now. Bass, walleye, small pike would probably bite this, and that is the Gunner 3.5 swim bait. So one thing I like about this swim bait over other swim baits that I've used is it is perfect if you want to use a jig head, or if you want to use a EWG or a swim bait hook, a normal screw lock swim bait hook. I personally like white and green pumpkin. This one here is in the white color. I don't have a green pumpkin one up here, but I do have a crystal shad with gold and black flake. Awesome bait. Probably one of my new favorite trailers. You guys have seen the video I done a while back where I showed you guys. I literally had the trailers on everything. Spinnerbaits, chatterbaits. I have a chatterbait right here with one on it. I have a swim jig right here with one on it, and my spinnerbait that has one on it is over there on my rod, and I don't want to go over there and get it. So you guys know I like using them as a chatterbait and spinnerbait trailer, swim jigs, or just plain old jig heads and slow rolling it. It's an awesome bait, has a crazy thumping action. In my honest opinion, it's probably better than any swim bait I've used, besides for bass, I mean. Probably better than any other swim bait I've used, especially if they're aggressive. My two favorite swim baits right now at the moment are the 4-inch swimmer and the 3.5 Gunner, and the reasons for that is they're two different swim baits. They're very different. This one here, the 4-inch swimmer, has a very finesse swimming action, very slow roll. This one here just comes through there wrecking everything, thumping like crazy. Has a really good action when you're fishing for those aggressive fish. And another thing that I like to do with it is jigging it off the bottom with a football jig or just a jig head. Walleye, bass, probably could catch crappie on it. Wouldn't be too surprised. I've had crappie come up on, topwater baits, 3 and 4 inches long. I'll show you here in a second a bait that I did catch a crappie on. Is actually my personal best crappie, and I'll show you that here in a minute. Next bait is another soft plastic bait, and this is actually a bait that I've only caught a few other species of fish, but I thought why not go ahead and feature it, because I have caught multi-species on it, and that is the 4-inch Ultra Finesse Worm. Now, a lot of people would look at that bait and think that's a bass bait. That's not going to catch any other species but bass. That's not true. I was fishing at Wacky Rig one day, and I fished at Texas Rig one day and was able to catch 2 bluegill. And I tell you what, they were some big ones. Probably the biggest ones of the year, probably, somewhere in that area. They were some monster bluegill and hybrids. One of them was a hybrid, and one was a straight-up bluegill. I was actually using green pumpkin. This here's chicken liver. I was actually using green pumpkin when I caught them, but I already had this one sitting up on the table and thought, why not go ahead and just feature it. The 4-inch Ultra Finesse Worm, probably one of the best finesse baits for bass, and it can also catch some pretty aggressive bluegill. Something I like about it, I've actually done this with the bait before, is I like to, if I find a bedding bluegill, I'll cut the tail off, and I'll just use the tail on a small jig head as a little straight tail pinworm. And it's caught some pretty decent bluegill as well. Next bait is a bait that you could use for walleye. You could probably use it for small pike. You could use it for smallmouth, largemouth. Crappie will hit this. Bass will hit this. Just about anything will hit this bait, and that is a 3-inch grub. This is a Doc Sewer Company 3-inch grub. Green Pumpkin Magic is the color on this one. Just plain old jig head and just slow roll it. That's pretty much what I do. Another thing that I'll do with it, if I go to a place that has a lot of grass and I want to fish topwater bait, that right there. 10-pound test, Berkley Trilene Finesse Swim spinning rod, and a 1/0 straight shank EWG hook, or straight shank offset hook, or whatever they're called, and a normal 3-inch grub. Now this here is minnow gray. The other one I showed you right here is Green Pumpkin Magic. Awesome baits. Okay, so last but not least, it's kind of a combination of a hard bait and a soft bait. It's, in my opinion, one of the all-time best multi-species baits. You can catch just about anything on it. In all reality, you can catch just about everything on this, and that is a beetle spin. So obviously, I'm not using the traditional beetle spin trailer. I'm using a 1.5 swim bait. I've noticed that with a 1.5 swimmer on the back, you can catch good bass, big bluegill, crappie. You can just catch anything with it. It's got that swimming tail, and it's got that little blade. Something that I've done before with these, back when I really fished them heavily, was I would replace the blade with a little bit bigger blade and a swim bait like that, just because you can catch a little bit bigger fish with it. That's just what I usually do. But a little beetle spin is a great bait as well. Next bait, so now we're going to be talking about the 4 hard baits that we have up here on the table, and this one right here is probably the only bait up here that has only caught 1 fish. But it's a bass bait. It's made for bass fishing. It's not made for what I caught the fish on. But I was actually using this jerk bait right here. This is a Cotton Cordell cheapie that you can buy at Walmart for like $1.79. So like an America shad color or something like that. Deep diving jerk bait. And I caught actually, it is my personal best crappie. Now, we didn't have a scale at the time, but it was somewhere around 2.5 pounds. Pretty darn good crappie for my area. Unless you find a hidden little gem of a pond. Pretty much all the crappie around here are around 10 inches long. I was able to catch about a 2.5 pound crappie on that guy right there. Very first cast I ever made with this bait. Cast it out there, was just jerking it as hard as I could, hoping for a bass. And the only fish I've ever caught on it was the biggest crappie of my life. So, kind of funny, but that's the only fish I've ever able to catch on this bait was a crappie. Next bait is a bait that I've had a lot of history with. I caught a crap load of fish on this bait one day. Was able to catch 14 bass and 2 bluegill on this guy right here. And since then, I've caught a lot of bluegill and a few hit or miss bass. There are not a whole lot of bass that hit this anymore, but most of the time when I do throw it, I usually catch a bluegill. And that is the little Rebel Teeny R crankbait, little crawfish pattern. I bought this thing. This was one of my very first lures, and I actually have another one of my very first lures up here as well that we'll talk about in a second. But one of my very first lures I ever bought with my own money was this guy right here, and never really threw it until one day I could see the fish were eating crawfish and just thought, hey, this is pretty much the only thing I have to imitate crawfish. Tied it on, cast it out there, and went ahead and caught 14 bass and 2 bluegill that day. So pretty darn good bait. I like the little rattle. I'm sure you guys can probably hear that little rattle. I like the rattle in it. Very subtle, very small bait, but it's still a killer on the bass and bluegill. So the next bait is probably my favorite topwater bait in the whole multi-species game, and that is a popper, a miniature popper, something that's very small. Now, I have one that's actually smaller. It's actually tied onto my rod. I was going to do a video on it, never got to because it got really freaking cold and just never was able to. So more than likely, the pond will probably be frozen tomorrow morning, so I don't know if I'll be able to get out and do a video. The wind has been absolutely absurd the past few days. Like, I'm talking 30 to 20 mile an hour winds. It's been crazy. So the videos have not been able to be made outside because of the wind noise. That's why I didn't even post anything yesterday. But this popper was able to catch me a lot of bass and was able to catch me quite a few big bluegill and was able to catch, actually not really catch it, but it was able to entice the big crappie. And I tell you what, this crappie was huge. Like, I'm talking 2.5, 3 pounds, if that. I mean, I'm talking huge. And I was actually fishing super duper clear water and was able to have a monster crappie come up on this thing and hit it. And of course, me, not knowing any better, just slammed the hook like I was frog fishing and ripped the lips on that crappie, so was unable to catch it. That happens, though. That happens to the best of us. So the next bait and the last bait. Now, this is a bait that not only myself, but my brother has also caught some pretty good bluegill and bass on this as well. He actually had about a 2.5 pounder come up on it this past summer, but was unable to hook it. But he was able to catch quite a few big bluegill, and I also caught a lot of big bluegill. And that is a little floating crankbait, jerkbait by Rapala. Now, I'm going to be 100% honest with you. I absolutely hate Rapala Lure Company. I cannot stand their baits. I've bought probably somewhere in the realm of 10 to 15 baits by Rapala. Some of them were gifts by people who didn't know any better. Some of them were just baits that I thought, hey, you know what? I've got the money. They're on sale. I'll go ahead and buy it. That's what this guy here was from. I got that bait there for like $2, I think, in a sale at Walmart. It's actually like a $7 bait, but I got it for $2 at a wintertime sale from Walmart, hoping that the Walmart locally will have one of those here pretty soon. But that there, I don't use it the way most people use it. A lot of people would use this little jerkbait as a jerkbait or a crankbait. I don't use it that way. I use it as a small topwater bait, little bitty wake bait. Now, I'll tell you the really quick reason why I absolutely hate Rapala Lure Company. I've bought all those baits, and I've never had a single one run right. I've bought deep diving crankbaits. I've bought topwater bait. Actually, no, never bought a topwater bait. I bought jerk baits. I've bought jointed baits. I've bought deep diving crankbaits, and every single one did not run right. I bought a deep diving crawfish colored crankbait, and I ended up giving it away as a homemade Christmas ornament. I took a Christmas hook, took the treble hooks off of it, took a Christmas hook and put it on there, and gave it away as a Christmas gift from me. And the reason why, it never ran right. I would cast it out and it would start running right, and then all of a sudden it just start slowly swimming off to the side until it came up to the surface. Every single time I do that. I have a jointed jerkbait in here somewhere. I don't throw it because it doesn't run right. Most of the jointed baits will have a kind of an S action in them. It doesn't. It kind of does a few S's and then it'll float back up the surface sideways. I just don't like Rapala Lure Company. I don't even use this bait as it's intended to be used. I use it as a topwater bait because it is a floating jerkbait. It basically sits on the surface, and then I'll pop, and it kind of shakes a little bit as it pops, and that's about all I use it for. And I've caught some pretty good bass and bluegill on it. So if you want to purchase any of the soft plastics in this video, let me know down in the comments. I will get back with you pretty soon after you comment. If you want to purchase any of them, let me know. I'll go ahead and go through how many baits come in each pack right now. 3.5 gunner, you get 8 baits in each pack. The 1.5 swim bait, you get 20 baits in each pack for $4. The 2-inch swimmer, you get 15 baits in each pack. The 2-inch DS minnow, you actually get 20 in a pack as well. The 4-inch, the 4-inch ultra finesse worm, you get 15 in a pack. The 2-inch little flat runner, hang on one second here. The 2-inch flat runner, I'm trying to find it on my list, but that light's got my eyes all messed up here. 20. You get 20 baits in each pack. Awesome jigging bait right there. And the 3-inch grub, you get 8 in the pack as well. So that's pretty much it. I think I listed off all the baits. Hard baits, honestly, you'll probably have to find them on your own. I know they don't make this anymore. I don't believe they make that anymore. I haven't seen one literally since I bought the dang thing. I've never seen one of these again after I bought that one. And the ones that they have of these are like $8. And the popper also, I don't think they make anymore, because I bought these 2 baits in the same package, and I've never been able to find another package of those, because I wanted to buy one for my brother's birthday to try to get him into bass fishing, and was unable to ever find them. Wasn't able to buy them on eBay or on Walmart.com. So I don't know if they just quit making them or what. Beetle spins, you can pretty much find them in any outdoor store. I mean, I'm sure you could probably find them in like places like Kmart and stuff, because it's pretty much the oldest form of lure, other than like the little minnow bait and stuff like that. So I hope you guys liked this video. If you did, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. Share this video out. Been losing a lot of subscribers here lately. I don't know if YouTube keeps taking them away, or if people just are getting sick of my content, but whatever. Probably going to stick it out, keep making videos, because I know there's a lot of you loyal subscribers that still watch my vids. And I want to keep making videos for y'all, because y'all are the ones that are sticking with me and watching these videos. Even though they're not the best quality, they're not the best audio, they probably don't show everything in the world. I try to show everything that the other companies in other places don't. You know, I've never seen people talk about throwing you know, these little 2-inch swim baits for, you know, bass, bluegill, crappie. I've never seen people throw, you know, 4-inch worms for bluegill. I've never seen people talk about this kind of stuff. I try to talk about stuff that people don't talk about, because you're missing valuable information, like using a curl-tail grub as a topwater bait. Who's doing that? I ain't never seen nobody do it. I've done it. I've caught fish doing it. So, you know, I try to tell y'all stuff that other places don't, because I think that it's a great way to help you and myself learn how to bass fish. And I like teaching people how to bass fish. That was the whole main idea of the channel. So thank you guys for watching once again. Bye.